Hi, Brave Souls. Welcome back to Brave Mode Studios. I am back with Miss Kristen Johnson, and today we're talking about branding, what that means to build a brand. But it might not be what you think. We know some of the general things about building a brand we may have in mind automatically, like logos, things like that. But what does it really mean to build a brand, especially as a stylist or in the fashion industry, as a freelancer, all those things. So we're going to try to concisely give you some of our experiences, but also things that we've learned over the years that you can take into account as you're building your brand, whether you're starting a styling business, whether you are a freelance artist, working in the fashion industry. Just really can apply to anyone, but specifically for stylists, we want to get into that. So, Kristen, I'll let you go first. I know we talked about the why and
Mhm.
the how. So the discussion we were having before starting with the video today. So let's get to the why. Why are we or let me rerun a little bit. When it comes to starting a brand, your opinion was your why has to be intact. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? I believe that that's a great place to start because that informs the how, that informs how you network, that informs how you
Mhm.
work in general.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on that? And why was that the thing that you brought up first when it came to building a brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think your why is the most important thing because it fuels you and it keeps you going. It keeps you moving in the right direction. I feel like many stylists get into the industry, including me, and we think like, okay, well, we want to dress people, we want to help people, but like we don't necessarily dig deeper into why we actually want to do those things. Because there's so many stylists out here, so many personal stylists, fashion stylists, wardrobe stylists, and we all basically do the same thing. But what makes us different is the reason behind why we do the thing that we do, and also how we do it, like you mentioned. So I know for me, I didn't really think I had a why when I first started. I didn't really think that there was like this, crazy reason as to why I wanted to become a stylist, aside from just wanting to dress people and wanting to help people look good and find cute clothes. Like that was it. But once I got into the industry, I started moving, I started, being intentional about some of the decisions I was making. It made me, and even going through some of the experiences that I experienced, the challenges that comes with running a business, it kind of forces you to go back to why you even started. Because it's like, okay, I'm attracting a certain type of person that I don't necessarily want to work with, or I'm getting opportunities that don't really make sense with what I'm wanting to do. And you have to like take a step back and say, okay, well, what am I doing? Or uh what am I not putting out there? What type of energy am I giving that's making these types of people, come to me or inquire about my services? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have as stylists. Just people not necessarily taking us seriously and not really understanding our value. But that starts with us. At one point, I wasn't taking myself seriously. I didn't really understand my value. And I was pretty much conforming to, what everybody else was saying I should be doing, or just doing what every other stylist was doing. So to go back to the why, I really had to understand, like, okay, Kristen, like, why exactly am I doing this? And there were so many reasons as to why. I mean, obviously, I wanted to be a full-time business owner. Entrepreneurship was a goal for me. I wanted to be able to control kind of my lifestyle, in a sense. And business and being an entrepreneur allowed me to do that. But I also wanted to, on the business side of things, my why was basically to help women feel good in their clothing, but a certain type of woman, a woman who was having issues dressing her body, a woman whose body has changed and she isn't really sure how to properly dress her body. a woman who doesn't love her body for what it is and feels like she needs to lose weight or have a certain body characteristic or feels like she's lacking. And that's something that I actually dealt with too. So I say that to say most of the reason as to why we do things is because of something that we've gone through or something that we've experienced. And a lot of coaches have told me this in the past. They've mentioned, like, okay, you basically are your client. Like, you have a lot of characteristics of who you want to work with. Obviously, I can't afford my services, but the type of woman that I'm wanting to work with or aspire or desire to work with kind of looks like me and has had a lot of the same issues that I've had, but I've been able to pull myself out of those problems and my client hasn't. So I'm solving her problem by providing her with the solution. And I only know that solution because I fully understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it does make
And I
perfect
didn't
sense.
talk in circles.
No, you did. That was perfect. Made perfect sense because it is hard whenever you're starting. For most of us, I think we're getting into the fashion industry because we like fashion. We like
Yeah,
clothes. We may be a fashion history buff. We may whatever, but like there's some general passion just with clothing itself or the industry itself. You may not really be intentionally thinking about, how can I serve people right now? Like that may not be the
right,
thought you have.
right.
And I think it's like I don't know why I want to get in the industry. I just like the industry. I'm
Yeah.
passionate about it. Fun. I think it's cool. So I think, yeah, that makes sense because I think at some point, like you said, you almost get forced to create a why, or at least be able to kind of pin it, like, and
Mhm.
have a very specific why. Because I think with like any industry, it can get mundane, it can get tiring, it can get frustrating. Um, as a freelancer, especially because you're having to kind of keep yourself going all the time. And that
Yeah.
can be very difficult to do. You may have to pivot. We talked about that before. We may have to pivot what you're doing, the type of work that you're doing, the type of style that you're doing, which I'm obviously like I've definitely have gone through. So it's like there's the why kind of has to stay intact. And
Mhm.
then that can help you create vision for longevity and being able to continue pushing through when you go through different seasons that aren't particularly inspiring.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important. That's super important. I want to get to the how. So now that we know,
Mhm.
like, whenever it comes to brand building, it's very important to have a great, public presence, whether that's a logo, whether it's, color scheme, your website is professional, you have a domain name as your email and not just a Gmail or a Yahoo, but, things like that. All those things are super important. I think those are great things to tackle even early on if you already know what you want the name of your business to be. Even as a freelancer, I always had Brave Mode as my business. That was always the case. Even before I had a YouTube channel, before any of that, it was always Brave Mode. So um, that was the website I used for my portfolio. That's strictly what it was originally. It's just a place for my digital portfolio to live. So that was always part of my brand. And since I had a website, I had also it was Jessica at bravemode.com, like, or whatever. That was my email. My email was always a domain name. So I wanted to be, like you said, be taken seriously, especially when I was, just getting into the fashion industry for real and wanting to
Yeah.
be taken seriously by people who were veterans in the fashion industry and wanted to start assisting or, working in TV and film and stuff like that. I didn't want to just, appear to be just any old person. I wanted them to know, like, no, this is a real important thing to me.
Mhm.
And I'm working toward it. Whether you give me the opportunity or not, I'm focused on it. And so that was important to me. So I do think that building a brand has to include those components. But if you only focus on those components, it kind of like breeds narcissism. Like you're just focusing on the outside. There's nothing below the surface.
Yeah.
So that's important. I think it's super duper important because your website, your branding, how you present yourself allows people to build a certain trust level to then want to investigate more about you.
Mhm.
So I think those are very pivotal things. but they're extremely surface level. It's very thin. You know, regardless of how good your website looks, you could still be a very talented person, a very hardworking person, and maybe your website's not as beautiful as you'd like it to be, but people know when they work with you, you're going to give them excellent quality. So
Mhm.
that goes into my how. Um, I think branding is truly about how you work. Who are you when you're on set? Do you, and you know, are you a person with integrity? Are you there to serve no matter what position you're in, no matter whether you're the key stylist or the assistant stylist or something in between? Is your goal to make sure that the client is getting their expectations met, that you're on time or really early? Are you early to the set? Are you making sure your area is kept neat and clean and organized, and you are um, there when anyone needs your help? Like, you know, there's all those things are added to that. And so then your talent can actually really be seen, because then it's not distracted by, there are people who are very, very talented, but they're always late. They're
Yeah.
always flustered, you know, but they're good at what they do, but they're frustrating to work with. You know,
Yeah.
that's branding. That is branding. Those your website will be there. It's just kind of there in cyberspace. But
Yeah.
when people actually interact with you, that's, in my experience, that's what made me rehireable. That's what kept me getting more and more jobs, because
Yeah.
in this industry, it is very much like your first job informs almost your next job, and then
Yeah.
that job informs the next one. Like you pretty much get work by just continuously working with people, and then it's like kind of like an idea web. Like you start with one, and then it kind of spreads out to other opportunities and connects to this one and connects to that one. Like that's that's how you're actually able to continue working in the industry for a long period of time. And
Yeah.
it's those relationships that you build by being a great person to work with, I think, is your branding, because people
Mhm.
know, like, regardless what your website looks like, I know when I hire her or hire him, I'm going to get quality. They're going to be on time. And I
Yeah.
can, even if they're not the most talented, I can teach them
Right.
how to do X, Y, and Z. But if you're here on time, I can help you. I can develop you
Hmm.
even. So I think I've noticed that's what is usually more important. That's when people say your name, what do they have to say after
Hmm.
working with you? That is your brand, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if your
And
why
what
is intact and they really are there, please. How about the ramble?
No, you're good. I was gonna say, and the feeling that people get when they say your name too, like even from a business standpoint, like I think it's important to set boundaries and really have like a streamlined process that you take your clients through. Because
Mhm.
I actually just did a video about this, as far as like transitioning from being a part-time stylist to full-time stylist. There are just some things that you need to really set in stone before you try to fully run a business and service people. And having those organizational skills, having those customer service skills really play a huge part in that. Because at the end of the day, you are your brand. And I mean, people see you first, even if they see your website. Like I'm sure you have photos on your website or even on your social media. So like how you look is great. But then once they actually start to like talk to you and work with you and get to know you, like you mentioned, that is the biggest thing that's going to keep them either coming back for more or referring you to other people. So like I'm really big on setting boundaries in my business. Like I don't respond to emails after six. Like Mondays, I'm technically off. Like it's certain things I don't do. And it's a matter of really setting that foundation when you're working with your clients so they understand how you work. Because if you don't, they're going to just do whatever and take advantage, and not like in a spiteful way, but just in a way as if they just don't know. They've never worked with a stylist before, 9 times out of 10. So they don't really know how to like conduct business with the stylist. So you have to like confidently set those boundaries and really set the tone for how you want to work. And that's all a part of like your brand and how you do things. So I think that's important. Just wanted to add that.
No, that is perfect, because those boundaries are super important, especially when you're
Mhm.
you're working with strangers. You know,
Yeah.
they you have to inform people what your you stand for, what your brand stands for, your company stands for, and like you said, how you work, so that they
Right.
know how to interact with you. And does That's a good point too, because I think for personal stylists and your freelance personal stylist, you're kind of running your own business as a stylist. Client to stylist relationship, that boundary, those having specific boundaries, super important. So I do want to mention boundaries about like fashion styling if you're working on a
Mhm.
set, stuff like that, because their boundaries can almost be non-existent, or it's almost disrespectful, depending on who you're working with, to have any boundaries. So that kind of opened up a little extra note here I'd like to add, which I do think can add to your brand. But there's a, you can find a way to communicate your boundaries as much as you can, and then don't let anyone take advantage of you. So my
Mhm.
example of that is that I've assisted early days. I assisted people who never wanted to pay me. Like, doesn't matter. They would have me running all around every borough of New York and did not want to pay me anything. And so, okay, the first time, fine. But then I was like, okay, the second time I was like, hey, so my base assistant stylist rate is this. can can we negotiate a rate for this next project? And if they say no, then maybe that's not the person you need to be working with. Um, but that's a part of your brand. Like, look, I'm to be respected. If you're going to come to me, I do expect some sort of compensation.
Mhm.
Typically, to give, if you're wondering like, what should I charge for as assistant to a stylist? Like, I would say like in New York, like a typical day rate was like $350 for a day. So, and that could be like an 8 hour day, to be a 12 hour day, but you want to make sure you know how many hours in that day you're working before you start.
Mhm.
But it's okay to communicate that. And I think people just kind of have to respect it, like I think that, yes, you should be willing to work, like a service should really be top of mind, especially if you're assisting whenever you are doing that. But even if you're the key stylist, you are there to service the client, the production team, whomever, whatever commercial you're working on, whatever, they've hired you to do a job. So you want to make sure you do that job.
Yeah.
But there has to be some boundaries with that as well. Like, no one should ever be asking you to use your own money
Mhm.
to purchase clothing or anything like that. That's a boundary to set in place. Like, this, I'm not, as a brand, as a person, even that can go into a very abusive space. And maybe they don't, like you said, may not be out of spite. It may not be that they just may be working. They may be used to working with people who just let them do whatever, and they're not used to having anybody say no to certain things like that. But there's ways to really set those boundaries, and I think that's such an important thing that we don't think about when it comes to building a brand, setting boundaries and what that really means. So that, I'm so
Yeah.
glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because I mean, just like you said, we don't know going in. And a lot of the boundaries I've set were because of me experiencing something that I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make sure that you all listening understand that the challenges that come with being a business owner and or a freelancer are inevitable. Like they're gonna happen. And those are the things that make you stronger. Those are the things that make you a better stylist at the end of the day. It's just a matter of paying attention to those situations and really thinking to yourself, like, okay, well, how can I avoid this from happening again? Or what can I do? Not even avoid, that's probably the wrong word because it's going to happen. But
Happen
like,
again,
what can I
right?
do? What can I do moving forward to like make this an easier like process for me and the client? I can think of one time where I was working with a potential client. We actually never worked together, but she was in the process of inquiring about my services. She wanted a lot. She wanted like me to style 6 models. I needed to style her. Like it was all these things. And before she paid me, or before, we got to the point of me even sending an invoice, we had like a couple of different meetings. And I want to say that a lot of time was spent, a lot of ideas were like tossed back and forth, a lot of, good information was provided to her about what she can do, how she can execute. And I wasn't paid for any of that. I wasn't compensated for my time. And this was before I was charging for like consultations and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not really doing much of anything, just, giving her, my thoughts and opinions. But that valuable information isn't something that she could have gotten on her own. She got that because of me.
Mhm.
Or, she got those ideas because of me and the conversations we were having. And when it got time to me actually curating an invoice and trying to figure out how much everything would be and sending it over to her, she never paid it because she couldn't budget for that type of service. And at the time, I wasn't even charging her much. I think I was charging her like maybe $1,200 to style six
Six
models and
models.
her. And
That's
all of
seven
that,
people.
seven people. And that also included within that $1,200, that also included clothing. So I still had to like buy clothing and pay myself. So I do want to say that, situations like that are going to happen. And it's because the person that you're working with just doesn't know. But it's important for you to take heed and pay attention, like, okay, well, this is happening and I don't really like this. So, like, what do I need to do to like make this a better process moving forward? So from then on out, I've always charged for my consultations. I've always charged for my discovery calls. Even then, it got to a point where I was just doing either phone calls or Zoom calls. They were only within a certain amount of time. Because when I was meeting with that woman, I was going to her office. We were meeting at her, on her time, and we were talking for hours. Hours we were talking. It wasn't like, and it was a good conversation. It never felt like I was like doing too much or like being worked. It was just because I enjoy work. So it just never felt like work to me. But from the outside looking in, it's like, yo, what are you doing? Like, you spent 3 hours here with this woman who hasn't paid you anything for your time, and you don't even know if she's going to become a client or not.
Uh,
Like, it's
the thing
that
is,
is what I mean by like setting boundaries and making sure that you're clear on how much time you're going to be spending with potential clients versus like actual clients. Because you can literally take 6 months to style someone if you don't actually set that boundary.
very
And
true.
that has actually never happened to me before, but I've heard about it happening with other stylists. It's like there's no need for you to be working with one person for
Like,
6 months.
not
Like
in,
you're literally,
it's like an ongoing styling situation. Like I've styled you either
yeah,
for several different things, or you're coming back to me on a like subscription sort of basis. Yeah,
right, right.
yeah.
And
Like
I
people can take advantage of you just
they can.
knowing the process. And we talked about before how people don't really understand what we do. They don't
Mhm.
know what we do.
At all.
But in my experience, even outside the fashion stream, this is a thing. I mean, my husband's a wedding videographer. He hosts discovery calls for potential clients. And they're free. Like I help him, with administrative things. So he run like I let him like we do 30 minutes of a discovery call, but we have very specific questions we're asking. And this is after they've already expressed that they're interested in booking us. This is really for us to just have an understanding of what they want and what they need. We have a very set time that we allow, like for the discovery call, for instance. And that, again, that's when they've already expressed interest. We sacrifice that time. We allow it to be free, but nothing beyond that happens. You cannot, whenever it comes to booking a date, and this is the case for like most videographers and photographers, but like when you book a date, it's not no like, hey, can I, my wedding or my event or whatever is on this day, can y'all just come? No, you pay for that date by the paying a deposit. Like, so you're going to pay to remove that date from the market. And then once the services have been delivered to you in full, then you pay the other half. But like
Yeah.
it's very clearly laid out. And something that we do is like, provide a contract. I've had stylists ask me, or new stylists ask me, like, should I have a contract? Should I be doing contractual work with clients and stuff like that? And I love to hear your thoughts on that because I wonder if you do contracts when it comes to your personal clients. For fashion styling, it's in working with like a say a production company for a commercial, for instance. Sometimes there's a contract, sometimes there's not. As long as I like to have everything in writing. So even if there's no contract, I don't necessarily force it, but I like to have everything in an email of
Mhm.
exactly what the agreement is because that still will hold almost like a contract will, just as long as it's in writing. But for you, when you're working with personal styling clients, are you drafting a contract with them? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm always sending a contract. I have a specific process that I take each and every one of my clients through. And I was going to say this as you were talking. I'm thinking, people will come to you because it has happened to me multiple times and still does. People will come to you and inquire about your services and kind of want you to go outside of your usual process that you take your clients through. So it can be very tempting to want to help them because we're helpers. We want to serve, we want to help everybody.
Right.
But you have to understand that when you take someone outside of that process, it's going to make it even harder for you to service them and do what you need to do so that they can, be provided the solution that they're, coming to you for. So I do want to say that real quick because I think it's important to mention because it's going to happen and it's going to be very enticing. But don't allow people to come to you and say, oh, well, I just need one outfit, or I just need, like, no, that's not how I work. That's not how my business works. This is how I work. And if this isn't what you're looking for, I can refer you to someone else. That's
Right.
perfectly fine. But I do actually have contracts because I think it's important to have everything in writing personally for me, especially with like instances or situations that come up because I will say one of the biggest things that I feel like kind of slow stylists up are their clients' availability. And it's like there have been times where I've been waiting on clients to get back to me with their confirmation or like their just letting me know that they like what I've sent them. And that slows up the process. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, having that contract in place really helps with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't send contracts until after the client like confirms that they're excited to work with me and are ready to move forward.
Yeah.
So we have a style discovery call or what I like to call a style breakthrough session. Mine is paid and it's 45 minutes. It's a recorded session. And I do very similar to what you do with very similar to what your husband does with his business. I ask questions, I gather a ton of information but I also am educating too. So they're also getting like gems and like good information from me that they could take even if they don't decide to work with me.
Oh,
So that's
uh-huh.
one of the main reasons why I charge for
Charge.
mine. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really just a session that really opens up their mind to different things that they've never thought of. But
Mm-hmm.
aside from that, once that process takes place, I send them the recording, I send them the email, just following up and saying, looking forward to or excited to work with you. It was nice meeting you. Typically, on that call, we confirm whether or not they want to move forward. And then I send over the contract. So I use a system called Dubsado, and it basically takes them through a proposal, the contract where they sign, and then it automatically sends them an invoice. So that contract is the same contract that all of my clients get. I don't necessarily have to like draft up a contract per client, but depending on what type of work you do, sometimes the work may change. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you may need to switch up a few things. I do offer other like services, so I may have to like switch out, what that service name is. But aside from that, I use the same templates. So to answer your question, yes, I send contracts. I did not always do that. But as a service provider, I think it's important for us to do that just to make sure that we and the client are on the same page.
I think that's so important. The with I'm glad that you charge for those because yes, if you're giving away actual information,
Yeah,
um, then yeah, and it's different from it being like what's on your YouTube channel because this is information that's specific for them. And so, that's so important that you charge for that. I do, there have been instances where I have used a contract, even if it's a brand that I'm working with, but usually if it's, especially if like you said, if it's their first time working with a stylist. So I worked with a pajama brand one time, and this woman, she had just started her pajama line. It was amazing. But she had never worked with a stylist before, but she knew she needed like branding photos for her, like product shots and branding imagery for her website and things like that. So, I definitely had a contract for her. So because she had never done it before, where I'm working with like production companies who hire stylists on a regular basis, and they're used to working with the same sort of people. Like I know they know what to expect. So having it in writing on email is just fine because I'm like, okay, well, I know they already are speaking my language. They already know what we understand each other perfectly fine. But
Yeah.
especially when it's their first time working with a stylist, I almost had to kind of prove to her why she needed a stylist, because
Mhm.
she had hired the photographer, and the photographer referred her to me saying, I think you need to get a stylist for this. And she's like, the first thing the minute we got on the call, she's just like, well, I'm not really sure that I even need a stylist, but I mean, I'll hear you out basically. But I was able to secure her as a client because I just kind of reviewed with her, like, okay, here's some things that I would do for your product shots. Like, here's, and letting her know, like, you do need some help.
Yeah.
Going on, get a photographer and you want some professional looking
Yeah.
photos, might want to go ahead and get somebody on set that can dress these models that you're going to have and all that
Yeah.
stuff. This, I think, showing value add is super important when you're talking with clients. That goes on with that branding aspect again. Like, I know they need to understand what the branding is for, or excuse me, not what the branding is for, but what the service is for, and what sort of quality you're going to be providing with that service. And again, that is with that, along with that branding, because it's like, if I know for a fact that when I hire this brand, I'm going to get this sort of quality, like we talked about earlier. It's the same thing, but you sometimes being able to communicate what that value is going to be, even if it is the same thing as some other stylist, you're just being able to, you have their attention right now. So now while you're talking to them, let
Yeah.
me help you understand what you're going to be getting when you work with me. And and then just let it go from there. But whenever you have consultations, things like that, presenting exactly what, like we talked about earlier, presenting exactly how your process goes,
Hmm.
um, when and how they can pay, why the service cost has a cost, even those things,
Yeah.
just be transparent, like, this cost because of this. And
Right.
then they can understand, okay, well, yeah, if I was doing that too, I probably wouldn't charge for it. Like, they can better understand what they're paying for. But we can we can kind of come to a conclusion. That's hard to say. Kind of come to a conclusion on what it means to build a brand. And I'm really enjoy these discussions because I think there's so many aspects that our viewers may not be thinking about.
Hmm.
And I hope that we are, helping to kind of blossom their thoughts around, like, okay, I need to think a little bit more broadly, or more narrowly about how I'm going about building a brand and what that looks like. So we talked about the why,
Yeah.
having a service mindset, perhaps, or is it because you really want to help people, or do you just really enjoy being in the fashion industry? But what does that mean? What do you enjoy about it, and how's that going to fuel you through doing the different work that you do? When you're working with, you love to see a vision come to life, and you love to collaborate. For me, that's one of my biggest whys is being able to collaborate with other creatives and see a vision come to life, and get my hands dirty with that. Like, I love that. That will never get old to me. But identifying that why for you. And then it's about, okay, once I kind of have that, I want to make sure that I present myself well on a public space, so that is, you're not always having to dress perfectly or anything like that. It's really about, when people see your branding, can they immediately trust that you are a quality brand? I think that's
Yeah.
what it comes down to. That your color scheme doesn't have to be perfect. The website doesn't have to be perfect. The pictures don't have to be perfect, but
Mhm.
just making sure that if it's neat and it is easy to navigate, I think most
Right.
people are pretty much okay with that. Doesn't have to be super expensive. You don't have to spend a ton of money with that. But is there a digital space that they can find your work like that is neat and easy to navigate? Then yes, most
Yeah.
likely that's probably sufficient. But having just a very neat presence that allows them to build that trust immediately, or kind of immediately say, okay, this person, they seem serious, they're real, they're not a scammer.
Hmm.
Like, so, okay, and that's good enough. And then and that can go hand in hand with your social media too. We talked about that before, but like, not, social media is not a requirement, but when it comes to branding, well, let me rephrase. I think it's kind of a requirement, but not to say that not the requirement is as if you don't have a super active social media, then you're not really doing
Hmm.
work. I'm just saying that if you're going to have social media, you're going to have a website, they should look like family.
Cohesive.
They should
Yeah.
look cohesive. Exactly.
Mhm.
So having a cohesive presence across platforms, I'll just say that, is most important when it comes to the public presence. But then Um, lastly, but not least important, is how you work
Mhm.
when you're working with clients, when you're working with other people in the industry. Do they know that you're going to be on time? Do they know that they're going to get the quality of work that they're hoping for? Are you going to be really exercising that why, in that space? No, it's like, if you love certain people, then serve your butt off. Like, really give them what they paid for. You know what I'm saying? Like, give them what they're asking for, and make sure you're clear on those expectations up front. That's where those, having plenty of communication beforehand is super important, or throughout the process, so that you know exactly what expectations you're supposed to be meeting. But, you know, do your best, work hard, do your absolute best in whatever you are doing, give it 100%, because that affects if you'll get hired again a lot of the time. I've had people call me back years later. They're like, we haven't needed a stylist in a while, but we really need one now. We loved working with you like 3 years ago. Can you come work with us again? Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised you remembered me, but cool. But it's like,
Mhm.
people don't ever forget a great experience of working with anybody. And so, yeah, I think that's a really great. I think I like what we talked about when it comes to building a brand. And I'm wondering what
Mhm.
some of our viewers are thinking. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below,
Please.
different perspective, because I think we touched on some important key points. Did you have anything else you wanted to kind of add to the conclusion?
Um, I was thinking, just to piggyback off of like pricing and like, whether you should charge for your consultations or not. I really think it just depends on your brand, like who you are as a person. And it's okay to, like we mentioned in previous videos, to pivot. I know, like I mentioned, I started off not charging and then I decided to start charging. And I will say, like, it is no right or wrong way to conduct your business or to, really brand yourself. But as long as it aligns with who you are, I know for me, setting that price point for my consultations helped to kind of wean out those people who weren't serious. It helped to kind of wean out those people who were wasting my time. And I know just from my perspective, like going to an event that's free versus going to an event that's paid, you're going to get a different experience depending on who's putting that event on. Even comparing products, like if a product is $5 versus $25, you're going to assume that that $25 product has better quality ingredients than the $5 one. And although that isn't always the case, because we know some products are great quality and they're just like a good deal. Cool. But I just feel like from a client's perspective, like put your, how do they say it? Put your shoes or walk in their shoes, something like that. But basically, think of yourself as the client and what you would want to see, what you would want to experience when you are working with a stylist, and try to figure out, and don't make assumptions, but try to just like, really get a clear understanding of what that could look like. And you can do that by, like we talked about, asking the right questions, really paying attention to what the client is saying, really listening to what they're in need of. A lot of people, they pay for my consultations, but they don't necessarily move forward. And that is one of the main reasons why I charge, because I do so much, and even just the consultation or like the first step, that if they don't decide to move forward, I know that I've given them a great, at least a great like first impression. And they probably will come back now that they've already like gone through that piece.
Yep.
But they've paid for their time so far. And it for me, it's like I don't want to sit and waste my time pouring into someone who I know is not going to move forward. Or if they do decide not to move forward, I don't feel like I've been like used or something like that, if that makes sense. So
Okay.
that's just my perspective, y'all. But I think both of our perspectives and ideas are very important to take into consideration and to just use your best judgment. A lot of this that I'm doing now, I didn't know when I first started. I started doing this probably 3 or 5 years in. or even like 8 years in. So it really just depends on your journey. But take your time, give yourself some grace, and don't think too deep into it. Just kind of go with the flow and see what happens.
That is fantastic. Well, yes, I think that's a perfect ending to this. Because I could keep going.
Right.
So, but yes, Brave Souls, you are getting our experience as well, but we love to hear about yours. So comment below, tell us your experiences with setting some boundaries,
Mhm.
pricing, all the things that are super scary for pretty much any business owner to do, but specifically for, for us as stylists and working the fashion industry, it's a hard thing to do. It's a really, really scary thing to do. And it's, as one of my mentors told me, like, it's an art form. And it's just a literal art form. There's the art of
Yeah.
styling, and then there's another art form you have to learn of pricing and branding and setting boundaries and communicating and all those things. But share your experiences below or ask us any questions. We're always here to help. But until next time, style well, live well, be brave. Peace. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.